Are going to jump right into our teaching today. So if you want to grab a Bible, you can turn to two things, Exodus 20, as well as 2 Kings chapter 5. Exodus 20, 2 Kings chapter 5, that's where we're going to land. And if you don't have a paper Bible and you would like to use one, there are some about every other seat or so in the seats in front of you. Or you can simply go to sermons.church on a browser on your smart device, search Cornerstone Church, and all the fill-ins and scriptures and everything will be there for you this morning. And to get us started today, I want to put you to the test. Y'all awake enough for a test this morning? You're okay. Some of you are ready. All right, they're raring to go. All right, so here I did a little research this week and found a study that brought up the top 10 favorite breakfast cereals. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the bottom 7, and I'm going to see if you can actually come up with the top 3. All right, and so here we go. Number 10 was Frosted Mini Wheats. It was weird. I was like, why did that even make the list? All right. Number 9, Cheerios. Okay, and one of our staff said the only reason that's even on the top 10 is because all the parents buy them for their children when they're babies. That's it. Okay, number 8, Reese's Puffs. My kids like that one. All right, number 7, Apple Jacks. Now, a lot of people hate Apple Jacks. I'm an Apple Jacks fan, so I'm glad this was in the top 10. All right, number 6, Fruity Pebbles. Right, that's a pretty good one. Barney and Fred Flintstone there. All right, number 5, Captain Crunch. Yeah, like somebody really likes that one. All right, number 4, classic Fruit Loops, right? That's been around for a long time. All right, so now that's the bottom 7. All right, so what do you guys think number 3 would? Give me some ideas. Lucky Charms is correct. Yes, number 3 is Lucky Charms. All right, now, I like it just the marshmallows. That's it. That's all right? All right, number 2 kind of surprised me. All right, give me some ideas. Rice Krispie Treats. Raisin Bran. It was actually this. Frosted Flakes. I'm like, Frosted Flakes, man. All right, and then numero uno, some ideas. You are correct, Cinnamon Toast Crunch. It is number 1. My son got this right off the bat. My daughter Eden was like, boo. She does not like that. And here's the crazy thing. My favorite was number 25. Golden Grams. I was like, come on, man, that beats them all, right? Golden Grams is really good. All right. So here's how'd you do, right? Did you get the 3? Did you get them in the right order, right? Those kind of things, right? Lots of great cereals there. I'm actually a huge cereal fan. Back when I was much larger than I am now, I actually used to eat a bowl of cereal, sometimes 2 a day, because they're just so really good for a snack, right? Because you don't eat it in breakfast time, you eat it for a snack, right? And so you might be thinking, okay, why are we talking about breakfast cereals as we begin today? I start with all that this morning because if you've been around the last couple of months, you know we've been in a message series here at the church called Reveal, How's Your 10? And we're looking at the 10 commandments. We're putting our lives up against the 10 commandments and saying, God, is there any offensive way in me? And if there is, maybe can you lead me to the way of everlasting, which is in Psalm 139, verse 24. And today we have actually reached the final commandment, number 10, all right? And so that's why I started with the top 10 lists. I figured that was a good way to get us in today. And so we are in number 10 this morning, and it's a message that I have titled, The Sin That Nobody Sees. And I think you'll understand what that is as we look at this commandment and why I chose that for a title today. So let's take a look at it. Exodus 20, verse 17 says this. This is the commandment number 10. It says, you shall not covet. So that's what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about coveting, all right? And we could just kind of stop right there, but it goes on. It says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. I shall not covet. If you look at that word, covet there a little bit deeper, look it up in the original biblical language. I actually love this word. You got to spit a little bit. It's chamad, all right? And it means to desire greatly, take pleasure in, delight greatly in. And so in other words, like coveting is yearning to possess. Yearning to have something, and looking around and yearning and coveting what others have, maybe just what we don't have, or maybe what we want. That's coveting. And so this commandment is basically saying, like, okay, that whole like looking around and trying to possess things or have things, or this commandment saying, hey, don't do that. But how many of you know that is not really easy to do? Right? Desiring things is very natural. It's a very human thing for us to go, oh man, I really want that, or hey, they've got that, why didn't I have that, and all those kind of things. And so so this commandment is basically saying, hey, it's our call to not covet, started asking myself this week, okay, how do we do that? Like, okay, God, this is what you want us to do, but how do we do that? And so that's what I hope to lay out today with some keys from a story in 2 Kings chapter 5 to help us do just that, to get better at coveting less. All right. And I mean, look, like the truth of the matter is God put this in his top 10, right? And I actually think that God put this in his top 10 because he knew that we would often struggle with this, right? It's why it's one of the top 10. We would need reminders of this and pointed it out. And so I actually think this is important to kind of cover in, not just for the series, but just in life in general. And so let's jump into this. We're going to take a look and read this story in 2 Kings chapter 5 to get kind of some direction in the midst of this today. And we're going to read a story about a guy named Gehazi. Everybody say Gehazi. Gehazi. It's kind of a fun name to say. All right, and this guy named Gehazi, he does some things that we'll see that will kind of give us some points for today. But before we look at the text, I got to kind of set it up for you because there's something that happens before then that what we're going to read today that is important for context to know what's happening here, all right? And so just before what we're going to read, there's this guy named Naaman. Okay, and Naaman, he's the commander of the army of the king of Aram. And he's kind of a brave guy, a heroic guy, and he does a lot of really great things, but he comes down with leprosy. Okay, it's a skin disease. He has leprosy, and back in biblical time, having leprosy was like a big deal. Like you got shunned, and there was a lot of things they didn't know how to treat it, all those kinds of things, right? And so he goes to the prophet Elisha. Okay, and because he's like, hey, I got the skin disease. I don't know what to do. This is a big deal. And the prophet Elisha tells him, like, well, hey, go and dip yourself into the Jordan River 7 times, and you'll be healed. And he's like, what? You just want me to go take a bath? Man, I ain't gonna go do that. Like, this is stupid. And so he walks away. He's frustrated. And then one of his team is like, well, if it works, why wouldn't you try it? So he actually goes and tries it, and he goes and he dips himself. Sure enough, healed. Right? And leprosy's gone. Okay. So then he goes back to Elisha, right? Because he's like, listen, man, I'm healed. Like, I want to pay you for this. Like, how much do I owe you for the healing, right? And Elisha's like, I don't want anything. Because now what happens is that Naaman's realizing, like, whoa, God is actually who he says he is. This God is real. And so Elisha, being a prophet of God, he's like, I'm good. That's payment enough, right? You understand who God is now. That's good, all right? Now, that's when Gehazi comes into the story, make some decisions that, again, will give us some insight in the midst of this, all right? And so let's pick this up in verse 20 of 2 Kings chapter 5. It says, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself, my master was too easy on Naaman, this Aramean, by not accepting from him what he brought. As surely as the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him. Gehazi hurried after Naaman. When Naaman saw him coming toward him, he got down from the chariot to meet him. Is everything all right? He asked. Everything's all right, Gehazi answered. My master sent me to say, 2 young men from the company of the prophets have just come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 sets of clothing. By all means, take the talents, said Naaman. He urged Gehazi to accept them and then tied up the 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 sets of clothing. He gave them to 2 of his servants, and they carried them ahead of Gehazi. When Gehazi came to the hill, he took the things from the servants and put them away in the house. He sent them away, and they left. When he went in and stood before his master, Elisha asked him, where have you been, Gehazi? Your servant didn't go anywhere, Gehazi answered. But Elijah said to him, was not my spirit with you when the man got down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to take money or to accept clothes or olive groves or vineyards or flocks or herds or male and female slaves? Naaman's leprosy will cling to you and to your descendants forever. Then Gehazi went from Elisha's presence, and his skin was leprous. It had become as white as snow. So that is our text today. And I want to a couple caveats. First of all, this story involves a guy named Elisha. Some of you know I have a son named Elijah. So I'm probably going to mistake Elisha and Elijah at some point. If I'm talking about Elijah today, it means Elisha. I'm just telling you, okay? Secondly, right, this involved this guy named Gehazi that I want to point out a couple things in the midst of this that I think hopefully will give us some greater insight and understanding to this whole coveting thing. And hopefully we're going to see maybe what not to do from Gehazi and be able to maybe have some practical things to take with us in our day-to-day lives, all right? But before I give those things to you, I want to pray. So if you would pray with me, and then I'll give you a couple things to write down and think about. So God, we thank you so much for an opportunity to come and to worship you this morning, to sing about how great you are and a miracle worker, and gosh, you're just incredible. And God, we're grateful that we've already been able to be in a presence of just meeting with you. And God, as we continue now that process of just being with you in the midst of this time, I pray, God, that you would make our hearts, our souls, and our minds supernaturally sticky so that what is in this message and what is in this text, on us understanding this 10th commandment and the story of Gehazi, God, that there would be things that we would be changed and altered by the power of your Spirit to live the way you want us to live when we leave here. God, it's not about what I have prepared today, but absolutely everything to do with the power of the Holy Spirit among us. So just we give this time to you and we honor you with it. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. And everybody said, amen, amen. All right, so we're going to just actually have one point today, but it's going to actually have several different layers. And we're going to kind of look at this. We're going to unpack it, but we're going to look at this whole not coveting thing through the story of Gehazi. And really, we're going to look at one specific verse to give us really our context for everything today. All right, and so write this point down. Here it is. We can covet less. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about coveting less by repeatedly not entering the chase. Repeatedly not entering the chase. Now, that kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense yet, and so let me unpack that for you, and I think it'll make more sense. I get this point, actually, and this is where we're going to focus most of our time in today, is verse 20 of our text, which, again, just a reminder, is when Gehazi says to himself, remember, this is the sin that nobody sees, this coveting thing, right? Gehazi says this to himself. He says, I will run after him and get something from him. And so as I was studying this week, I was like, man, okay, so like you had this whole situation, and Gehazi entered the chase. And specifically what I mean by it is the chase of what he knew might be available to him. Right? Because we know that he was privy to this conversation between Elisha and Naaman. So he knew that Naaman was trying to pay Elisha for the healing and all of that. And so like he was like, listen, if this dude's willing to give it, we should take it. Right? And if Elisha's not going to do it, man, I'll take it. Right? I'll take it. It says that he said, I will run after. He entered the chase of what he could have, what was out there. He was yearning, greatly desiring to possess what Naaman had, to have what Naaman had. It is the literal definition of coveting that we just looked at with that word like chamad, right? We looked at that word, right? It's the literal definition. This is what he was doing, right? And so what I want to focus on in this as we start this point today is, folks, there is value in not entering the chase. For you and I to not enter the chase. We're going to talk about how to not do that as we walk on today in this, but there's value to not entering the chase. And as I was thinking about this whole idea of a chase, I was thinking back to when, and I want you to think back for a moment, to when you were in elementary school, right? And you went out to recess, right? And there's always seems to be some sort of competition on the playground, right? And so like somebody says, well, hey, you guys start, you both right here, you start here, you start, and whoever gets down there first will get the sucker. Or we'll get the prize, or we'll get the coveted, the desired thing, right? And so, like, okay, from here to the soccer goal, and whoever gets there first gets it. And so I thought about that chase this week as I was working on the message, and it kind of made me think about how, like, sometimes that and that's all kind of fun. It's whatever innocent stuff on the playground, but how sometimes that kind of chase can mirror the chase that you and I can press into when we're, quote, all grown up in some ways, and how childish that is to enter the chase, to covet something, to yearn so greatly for something, like to just have like Gehazi wanted to in this story. As I thought about it, I was thinking like, sometimes we can just enter this chase, and we're supposed to be all grown up. That chase of the thing, the sucker, the desired thing, isn't supposed to be the thing that entices us, and yet we fall into that. And I'm just admitting to you that I fall into that. I'm guessing you do too. And so, like, I was just thinking, man, we would do better if we would more often come to the realization of the fact that, and I tell you, this is all worth the admission to come to church this morning, folks, is that we should come to the realization that running is tiring. I know, that was like the most spiritual moment I've ever had on the stage for you, right? But the reality is running is tiring. Now, my son, he's a runner. He went for a 6-mile run yesterday in the rain, and Lee and I are walking in the neighborhood, and he's like, hi, guys. So he doesn't see running being tiring, but I see running being very tiring. And the reality is, I'm thinking, folks, when we see the thing that the dangled carrot down over there or somebody else has or something that we want, I think sometimes we enter this childish chase in the midst of that, and we would be better if we would just realize that running is tiring, and we should just go, you can have it. There would just be so much value to go, because the reality is sometimes, how many of you know that those chases bring us headaches? Right? When we chase those things, all they are headaches, right? I was thinking about back to Gehazi, right? This did not go well for him. Look back at verse 27. Elisha tells him at the end, after all this does, Naaman's leprosy will cling to you and to your descendants forever. Then Gehazi went from Elisha's presence, and his skin was leprous. So this chase, this coveting, and then letting it play out when he then takes 2 talents and 2 bags of clothes and all this kind of stuff. In verse 23, the chase and the coveting had disastrous outcomes. And it wasn't just a disastrous outcome for him, but for future generations. You see, if we don't go to work on this, on us today, in this very moment, our natural human desire to covet, to chase stuff, folks, if we don't actually go to work on this, then it could have what the Bible calls generational curses for future generations. And I don't know about you, but I want my kids to be better than what I was. I want my kids to have better than I did. And so I do not want to pass on a generational curse of coveting to my children and to my children's children and on and on and on. And so we've got to go to work on commandment number 10. I think there's value in saying, okay, because can we just all be real? We all covet. There's not a single one of us in this room that probably this week has not coveted something. Sorry to tell you. Guess we need Jesus, right? Right? Y'all awake? You getting this? We need Jesus, right? The reality is if we're all coveting people, it's just a general human nature thing, then we need to go to work on how do we figure this out and live this out to not chase stuff. And then you think about Jesus' words in Luke 12:15. Jesus says, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Folks, even Jesus tells us this is a commandment that we've got to try to figure out, to live not chasing stuff and things. But man, it is so easy to do, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure I'm the only one in this room it's easy to do, right? This is so easy to do and to fall into. And so I was thinking this week about my life and sometimes how easy it can be to fall into this coveting thing. And I actually, though, started to think about, I am not perfect and good at this in most things, but man, there has been an area of my life that I feel like I have figured out how to not enter the chase. And it's specifically with vehicles. I hate vehicles. I hate them. They're a necessary evil. I really just wish we could go back to the Flintstones, right? And just walk everywhere, right? We'd have no motors. It'd just be bricks and all that. Because the reality is I can find myself, in my past, I have found myself where, folks, I will enter the chase about a vehicle. Oh, it has this feature. Oh, it has the double moonroof. And the Bluetooth. Oh, and the heated seats. How many of you know I needed heat seats, right? I can enter the chase and all those things, right? But how many of you know sometimes those bells and whistles are actually the first things that break? You know that, right? The reality is cars are just rust buckets. And they cost us so much money, and we've got to insure them all. I just hate vehicles. And this last, one of our last vehicles, man, we were so excited, Lee and I. Man, we were riding in style, baby. Got the moon roofs, baby, the Bluetooth. We've never had Bluetooth in our car, man. This is awesome. I know. Some of you teenagers are like, dude, how ancient are you, right? But so we had all stuff, and so we were so excited about this car, and a year and a half later, the transmission died. And so, folks, I just gotten to the point where, man, I don't care what the darn thing looks like. I don't care what kind of features it has. In some sense, I want to go back to no features. My father-in-law sitting in the back, they just got this new Subaru thing, and it beeps at you every 5 seconds and jerks the wheel and puts you back in the lane. I'm like, can I rip that crap out of there? That's annoying, right? I know, I'm probably the only one. I'm probably not a safe driver, whatever, okay? But all that said, I've just gotten to the point where I just want I want the thing to start and I want it to run. Listen, I am a minivan dad and I like it. I mean, we might be minivan people the rest of our lives. Like, we're going to be those like 80-year-old people in the minivan, baby. Come on. And so I've just gotten so frustrated with chasing stuff that, like, by the way, there's actually a scripture, I don't have it for you, but it actually says, why are we putting our trust in things that moth and rust destroy? We should not put our trust. And so much of our lives in this coveting thing can be, and I've been there before, and we just want simple car that runs and starts. Like, man, I don't care I literally don't. Like, I was thinking, like, man, if it has rust side, like if it has, like, I mean, it could even have a hole in the side of it maybe. As long as things, okay, Leah's like, no. Like, I'd take it, man. I just don't care anymore. Now, I will say that that's just one area of my life. And there are so many other areas where I don't have that kind of mindset. But here's why I tell you that. That gives me hope that it's possible to folks to covet less. If I can covet less in a car, because I'm just like, I know that there are ways for me to do that in other things. And so to do that, I just need to change my mindset. Because my mindset has shifted with vehicles right now. I just don't care. And so we just need to change our mindset. You and I both do. And so where I want to go for the rest of our time together is, like, I want to talk about how to do that. So how do we do that? How do we change our mindset? In those places where it's so easy for us to covet or to chase after all this stuff, how do we change our mindset? You know, Luke 12:15 again, Jesus says, hey, watch out, be on your guard. How do we do that? How do we get on our guard against coveting? Well, I think the first thing that we have to do, and you can fill this in, is we've got to go to work on identifying the feeling. You can fill it on here now. We've got to go to work on identifying the feeling. And what I mean by that is that, folks, I think sometimes we don't recognize the coveting feeling. Like, we don't realize that the feeling is present in us. And because it's just like natural, like the American dream. And hey, we've worked hard for this and all those kind of things. And what we're really doing is we're in the chase. We're coveting things, and so we don't even recognize that it's there, and that's what's driving things and the decisions and all those kind of things. And so what I think we have to do to identify the feeling, because I think you can go, well, I'm just going to try to be more aware of it. Likely, you're probably not going to do that because you are probably like me, and the reality is it's really easy to get tripped up here. So how do we do that? Well, I think that we have to have a regular assessment rhythm in our lives, and specifically, maybe it's not every day, but at least maybe once a week, maybe once a month, we need to assess our lives and ask this question. You can fill this in on your handout too. Ask this question: am I changing something to get something? Am I changing something to get something? Have we, or are we considering changing something to get something? Changing our schedule, where we go, what we do, what we fill in the blank. Are we entering the chase, changing something to get something? Now, I want to be very clear that, like, sometimes that's a good thing, change, right? Not all change is bad. But folks, if we are changing something in order to get something, then it may be worth looking at whether we should. Like, if we're changing something in our schedule, where we go, what we do, blah, blah, blah. If we're doing all of that just so that we can get something, sometimes that might be okay, but sometimes we should go, I should rethink that. I mean, if we're because what's happening is, like, sometimes we're only changing those things so that we can walk out what we covet. We're only changing things so that we walk out what we covet, right? And if we're changing things just to simply walk out what we covet, so for example, like the bigger house. You know, you don't really need a bigger house, but you just want a bigger house, right? Or the property, or a newer car, or some relational side thing to change things so that we can go flirt with that person, right? If we're changing something in order to get something, there may be coveting motivation in our heart. And it may be worth not doing those things. And instead, rather than changing the schedule to go after what we covet, we should go to work on being content. Now, I know that's not easy to do, but it says in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6, it says, but godliness with contentment is what? Say it with me. Great gain. So if we actually say, okay, God, this is the commandment. I want to be in your godly ways, right? And we actually add contentment to that, then that's going to get us way more than chasing what we covet. Now, all that said, I know that's easier said than done, but it's something that we should acknowledge. I mean, let's take this to the extreme for just a second, something I just mentioned. If we go back to our verse in Exodus 17 for the commandment, it actually says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You're like, okay, shouldn't covet my neighbor's house. But then it goes on and says, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male or female servant. Now, I was thinking this week, like, look, if we're changing things, like, folks, if we're changing things in order, like to like change our schedule and like do this and that and whatever in hopes that we can actually cross paths with so that we can do a little bit of innocent flirting. By the way, it's not innocent if you're not single, and it's not innocent if it actually is a neighbor's wife or husband, right? And so if we're changing all these things and we're doing this to in order to innocently flirt with that, look, we ought, instead of actually going through that, we should ask ourselves, why are we doing this? Why are we making this? Because the reality is maybe there's just a reason to work on your own marriage. Can I tell you, I think there are way too many people that think innocent flirting is okay. I know, some of you are so glad you came to church today. But I really do think that sometimes too many people live in this. And so, like, man, instead of that, like, it is so much more valuable, instead of changing your schedule to interact with so-and-so, like, can I just, at first service, this isn't in my notes, folks. Can I just tell you, if you need to go to counseling, go to counseling. I think there are some churches that would say, oh, just pray about it. Yes, pray about it, but go see a counselor. Like, go see a counselor. I think too many people would rather just say, like, oh, yeah, my marriage sucks. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, I said sucks in church, right? But my marriage sucks, right? And so, like, hey, have you gone to counseling? No. Go to counseling. I think there's something to that, right? Because that is way more valuable than you going around and doing all those things and flirting with those people and doing all those kind of things. Like, go to work on your marriage. It's a covenant that you said you were going to be in for the rest of your life. So do it. It's way more valuable to ask why you're doing that than rather just go in line with what is meaningful for you, for them, and ultimately to God. I mean, I was thinking this week about a few weeks ago, we studied the story of David and Bathsheba in 2 Samuel chapter 11. And I was thinking, man, David would have benefited greatly from assessment when he was like, remember, he was on the roof of the house and he looked down and he saw Bathsheba bathing, and he would have been, it would have been of great value to him if he would have just done some assessment like, what do I do here? But two, what he did is he just entered the chase of Bathsheba. It was a coveting moment and situation that he then indulged, and he created a massive mess. There's value, folks, to identifying this feeling. Because I honestly, as I put myself in David's shoes, I'm thinking he probably didn't know what he was feeling. He didn't know what he was feeling. And so I don't know about you, I don't want to put myself anywhere close to some of those things. And so I want to come to grips with this feeling. I want to see it from far off. I want to know that I'm like having this coveting feeling, because then if I know that I'm having this coveting feeling, man, I can shut that sucker down. And I want to shut it down. And here's, not just because I want to do everything right and whatever, I mean, I do, but I think here's the key. Like, folks, if we indulge what we covet, it actually robs us of today. And what I mean by that is that I think sometimes we can so focus on maybe what's out there might be available to us, you know, like some things other people have that we want, those kind of things, and then we actually miss the things that are right in front of us. We miss the things that are right in front of us. And actually, that's the next step to this whole, like, changing our mindset thing to covet less. You can actually write this in, folks. I think we need to more often look for and at what we already have. We need to look at and for what we already have. I was thinking about going back to Gehazi, right? Like, this guy, like, there was a lot of incredible things going on in Gehazi's life, right? Like, he was literally like traveling and with the prophet, a prophet of God, which in a way in itself is a big honor. Like, he gets to be with this prophet that's doing incredibly, he's seeing firsthand miraculous things of God. I mean, there's so much good stuff going on with Gehazi. I mean, Elisha's like, he's gaining popularity, and there's some steam. Like this guy's got some good stuff going. He just didn't choose to see it. He was so focused on what else he could get. Like, you and I think you and I would benefit so well if we would simply more often look around to what we already have. And most of us, probably nearly all of us, folks, we all have quite a bit of stuff. I mean, some of you have a garage, you need to get rid of some stuff. Like, in comparison, by the way, and I'm not, trying to make funny, but the reality of it is, folks, compared to the rest of the world, if we've got a garage full of stuff, they got nothing. And yet we got garage full of stuff, an attic full of stuff, a storage, Most of us, if not nearly all of us, have so much stuff. We just have to look around to what we already have. And then not only that, look around, like that's just physical stuff, but look around emotionally, relationally, maritally. Look, I know it's not going to be perfect. People are messy, right? But often there is more there than we choose to see sometimes. I think sometimes we miss the relationship. Can I just tell you something? Like I'm in this place right now where I feel like I'm trying to learn a little bit about our Gen Z generation. And I was listening to a podcast this week, and they were talking about the fact that Gen Z, which is, like our teenagers up to like age 30, right? Our Gen Z folks are the most connected generation ever in history, but the most lonely in history. Folks, it's because we're in this world, and I think we're all kind of trickling into us too. Like we need to help these young people, and we need to see the relationships, the connections that we already have, rather than just worrying about like this whole FOMO thing and everybody's doing all this stuff. I don't want to do all that stuff, right? Just we got to help these people connect and figure out like how to like see what the relationships there. Like people, I was just talking to somebody yesterday, and the reality of like, people don't find each other dating become from face to face anymore. Four of the last six weddings I've done, people found each other online, which that's fine. I'll follow. But why are we finding people online rather than just face to face? It's because we're so connected but disconnected. And we need to see what we already have. And so I want you to ask yourself this question: what do you already have? Relationally, emotionally, maritally, in your stuff. What do I have? What we need to look around and just see what is already there. We would benefit greatly, and essentially, and this is not a new concept for you, but I just think it's important to mention, folks, we would benefit from having more of an attitude of gratitude. Having more an attitude of gratitude. Not necessarily seeing what others have and we don't and those kind of things. Go to work on an attitude of gratitude. And then, of course, in the midst of all of that, thanking God for all of it, right? The little, the Mac stuff and all that, like just thanking God in the midst of that. And then not only that, like having an honest rawness to God. Man, I tell you, like if you, like sometimes we got to be honest with God and say, God, I want this thing. And I really feel like this is a covenant, like wrestle with God. Like there are people all in the scripture that wrestle with God. If you've never wrestled, go wrestle with the Lord. By the way, we're going to have human desires that are going to go against what God, and he was like, okay, chase perfection, but you're probably not going to be. Wrestle with the Lord in the midst of, like I was thinking back to the Psalms, man, read the book of Psalms. You see in the psalmist, and David is one of them, by the way, that just as they wrote the Psalms, they were wrestling with their humanness to do the things that were against God, and they were so easy to do, but yet they said, Lord, help me, crying out to God. So wrestle with the Lord. And just say, Lord, I need to have an attitude of gratitude, but it's so easy to see what everybody else has. Let God speak into that. It could keep us from entering the chase. We could covet less. And I know personally, I want to covet less. I want where I've gotten with vehicles, I want to get there in so many other places in my life. And I think there would be value for all of us to do that. Now, real quick, the other side of this, though, is I was thinking about this attitude of gratitude thing. Another piece of this attitude of gratitude might possibly be something called lament. Now, that might be a new word for you. Lament means to mourn something. And I know that might sound a little bit strange in the midst of this, but when we were walking through this particular teaching as a teaching team months ago, one of the people in the meeting had just lost their dad. And so they were saying, hey, like I kind of get envious and jealous of people who still have their dad. And so I was thinking, maybe there's a place for lament rather than coveting. Like still like lamenting because you're sad, but like not looking at somebody being jealous of them, or like just having an attitude of gratitude of the fact that, man, I'm so glad I had that person in my life, or when I had them in my life, or maybe just the reality of like, hey, I want to hold on to the good memories of that person, right? There may be a reality of lament, all the while still having an attitude of gratitude in the midst of it. And so I think this is something to consider. And I want to just kind of wind things down. Jeff, you can go and come on up. I want to wind things down. I just want to repeat this point, folks. I think that we can covet less by repeatedly not entering the chase. It's what we actually see Gehazi not do. He gives full vent to all of this, not really assessing the why he was doing what he went after, and that he was doing something just to kind of get something, because he was like, hey, I'm just going to chase after, I'm going to run, and I'm going to get something from him. He didn't see what he already had with Elisha. The chase, I think, was on for Gehazi. I think there were some great lessons to learn and implement in our lives. Do the opposite in our lives. Not chase after coveting, but instead, as the Apostle Paul says in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, but instead run the good race. It actually says there, it says, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. And so instead of coveting things, let's do that. Let's chase after that. Let's go after that. Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, whether we have or we don't have, whether we have a little or we have a lot. Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. And so I want to end today, as I've been ending every message in this series, I want to ask you this week, how's your 10? How's your 10? And specifically, I mean that specifically this week, like, how's number 10? How's this coveting thing? What level does coveting play in your day-to-day? Is it rarely? I think there's probably some of you who's like, it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen a little bit. I think all of us covet a little bit, at least. So if you're rare, in the rare category, man, keep going. But go to work on those places where you can still kind of easily covet. Maybe for some of you, it's like sometimes it's like half and half. Like, man, it depends on the day. Maybe others of you, it's like a daily thing. But I think it's worth trying to figure out how to identify this feeling, ask this question, be grateful for what we have. Because again, God put this on his top 10 list. We needed to be reminded of this. It's something that we need to continue to shoot for. So how's your 10? As I looked at my life this week, I was like, man, I'm so grateful for the vehicle thing, but gosh, there's so many other things. Man, I can covet so many things, like other church culture things, like I can like just possession things, like I want a boat. You know? I know that the best day of a boat owner's life is the day you buy it and the day you sell it, right? But man, like, but I got to shut that down, man. Like, I want the Lord's help to do that. So here's what we're going to do when moving into our time of responsive worship and prayer. I'm going to go ahead and hit that mat. I want you guys to remain seated for just a minute. I want to do something a little bit different. The worship team is going to come get ready here in a minute. But I thought about, doing something a little bit different. Like I'm going to describe an opportunity